Welcome to Leaders of Life Sciences, the podcast where we spotlight the people shaping the future of pharma and biotech. Each episode, we speak with founders, senior execs, scientists, and strategists about how they lead, what drives them, and the real impact they're making on teams, organizations, and the lives of patients. If you want fresh insight into what great leadership looks like in life sciences, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. To today's episode, and our guest today is Dr. Tom Chittenden. He is a globally renowned biomedical AI expert and a visionary leader who is revolutionizing drug discovery through cutting-edge artificial intelligence. He's been named by Forbes as one of the top 100 pioneers in drug discovery and advanced healthcare, and Tom holds multiple doctorates from Oxford and Harvard and has led groundbreaking AI platforms that are setting new standards in pharmaceutical R&D. His work spans multimodal AI strategies, tackling some of the most complex diseases. He's an honorary professor at Queen Mary University of London, has taught at Harvard Medical School and MIT, bridging academia and industry with unmatched expertise. Tom, welcome to the show. A mouthful for me to get through there initially. First question I want to ask you is, running through all of that, running through your experience and your background, what is it that makes you most proud of what you've done throughout your career?
Fantastic. Well, Will, I'd like to just acknowledge thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk to you today. And that was quite an introduction, so I hope I do not let you down here today.
I can't imagine that will happen today, Tom. Can't imagine it.
To your question about, and if I can interpret it there a little bit, I think what we've done and probably what will have the most influence in the space is what we've done from a causal AI standpoint, is that we have moved away from what correlates with disease at the molecular level to actually building AI algorithms that can delineate the causal drivers of disease. And in fact, we have spent over a decade now working on these algorithms that are capable of building causal dependency structures that are relative or reflective of the signal transduction cascades that drive cellular behavior and dictate phenotype. And I think if the field is going to build more efficacious drugs, we really got to get at the heart of what drives disease at the molecular and biochemical levels.
You've had a fascinating career, and I know I'm going to admit this now, and we've discussed this in previous conversations leading up. A lot of this is self-admitted. This goes way over my head, but this is something you're really passionate about, and I really buy into the energy with which you kind of deliver your beliefs on the industry and where it's going, and what you're excited what you're excited to achieve. And it sounds with such certainty that you think you can achieve it, or the industry can achieve it. What are you most passionate about in the space right now?
What am I most passionate about? Well, it has to do with the causal AI aspect of what we've been working on. But I think if I were to roll back the clock more than a couple decades now, and I don't want to come up and say that it was 3 decades ago because I'm dating myself, but my road to Damascus experience was early on in graduate school when I was sitting in a molecular biology class, and the professor invited a speaker from the NIH, and this individual was into systems biology and pulled out one of the very early Affymetrix gene expression chips, the DNA chips. And, he started to explain a future that we could capture the entire transcriptome in a single assay. And I was absolutely convinced at that point that was the direction that I wanted to go. In fact, I built that into my first dissertation. We were working with obstructive sleep apnea. It was a 2-chip experimental design, so very, very naive looking back at what we were doing now. But we generated gene expression profiles across the entire transcriptome, and then we were analyzing the data in a simple Excel spreadsheet. So we are light years ahead of where we were back in the late 90s there. But I think that was that moment where I could see how AI, machine learning, was eventually going to lead to a better understanding of the molecular drivers of disease.
When you look back at that, were there any key moments that stand out to you that you felt sort of changed or shaped the way that you think about disease today?
Yeah, and I think that that stems back to that early class that I had there in molecular biology, because I was working on a very difficult problem where we had identified a gene that had, you know, that we believe was involved with obstructive sleep apnea. So the hypoxic events, the acute hypoxia while an individual sleeps, ended up increasing the expression of a receptor that we had identified. But I was trying to find the molecular mechanisms that were associated with what was going on. And it just felt like I was chasing my tail at the time. And so when this individual from the NIH started to explain how you can capture the entire transcriptome on a single chip and a single asset, I was hooked. I was hooked. And I've spent the past 25 years building algorithms to be able to analyze that data in a more generalizable, robust manner. One of the issues associated with AI and machine learning is that it's not reproducible. So you can find a signal within a patient cohort or within a specific experimental design, but when you get to another experimental design or patient cohort, the algorithms tend to find a different set of features that are actually driving it. And those were the early days of classification. So we have spent more than 20 years. And when I say we, I've worked with a number of really smart individuals that have helped me advance the field.
The way things have changed since when you first started on those Excel spreadsheets to what you have your disposal now, particularly with what we've discussed around AI, quantum machine learning, how has that changed the way that you approach things, the way you see things, the advancements, how we uncover the root causes of disease? Like, what's those changes over the years and what we're looking at now? What would you say? And I know there must be so many differences in comparison. What would you say are the kind of key palpable differences that you see right now?
Yeah, the differences or the algorithms and why they are different now from what they were back 25, 30 years ago, I can directly attribute it, in our case, to all of the failures that we've had. We have learned a great deal because of those failures. So when you're dealing with something like the entire genome or the entire transcriptome, metabolome, proteome, a lot of these signals are so closely related, it causes something in the field called multicollinearity, feature dependency, correlation bias. They're almost identical signals. And so when you're running your algorithms, the algorithm on the first run can pick a certain set of signals or gene vectors, if you will. And then you slice and dice your data and you run it again. You can get a different set of gene vectors. And so what we have learned over the past has stemmed from those failures. And that is what has led us to looking at various graph-based analytics and causal AI strategies to address those issues, to bring AI and machine learning out of the classification era, the black box era, if you will. You get a result, you can discriminate or you can predict a disease, patient versus a control, a healthy control, with 99% accuracy. We've done that over the years for quite some time, but we really didn't understand these features, and that's what we refer to them as, that are actually driving the classification. And so by building very sophisticated feature learning approaches that then lead to generative AI and how we stratify patients or cells now, because we are at the single cell level, it sets the stage for graph-based analytics and causal AI, where then we can build these graphical networks that are very easy to interpret, where we can identify what we believe is responsible for the state of the entire network, and then we can go in and experimentally perturb those signals and see the effect on the actual network and the phenotype itself. And so those types of strategies, I believe, have significantly advanced the field.
What do you see as the implications of this then?
Well, I'm a real proponent of expelling the hype that currently exists in the AI space. So I'm going to say something that's going to sound very hype-ish. Or hypey here, is that I believe that AI, with all of its capabilities right now, it's very good at generating working hypotheses, allowing us to ask questions that we would have never thought to have asked. And where that is going to lead, I believe, eventually will eradicate disease. Now, maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm sure we're gonna see some significant advances in a number of different therapeutic areas. At least in my 11-year-old granddaughter's lifetime.
I thought you were saying you're not one to hype it up, Tom. We're going to eradicate disease as a result.
I think that's where it's going. We have a very long ways to go, but I think that AI is going to bridge that gap from, what we know with what we currently don't know. And that will allow us to address a lot of significant unmet medical needs, such as sepsis, right? When the immune system is out of control, and what that's going to do to underdeveloped third world countries. There's just going to be significant advances here within the next 5 to 10 years.
You've mentioned causal AI, and I know in the build up we were talking about the impact of agentic AI, generative AI on the space. Have you got anything else you can kind of add on that piece?
Well, we've been working with quantum computing, so various high performance computing platforms we have looked at. And the reason that I had turned to quantum computing probably about 10 years ago is that for some of the warts that we have with conventional computing platforms and conventional mathematical and statistical strategies, we have turned to quantum computing and quantum-like machine learning algorithms, because the quantum computing hardware is not quite to the point, it's not ready for prime time yet. So we have turned to statistical physics, statistical mechanics. So approaches where we are looking at statistical optimization strategies that move from minimizing an error function, for example, to minimizing an actual energy function. And what we're finding is that these strategies are significantly more robust, especially on smaller patient cohorts. And this is going to have direct implications with clinical trials.
The other thing that we've heard our side is how slow, or at least we've heard about the thoughts on sort of Big Pharma's approach to AI adoption and the perception that they're slow. Why do you think they are sort of slower to change and adapt to this?
A couple of different things on that. I think the slow adoption has to do with the inordinate amount of hype that exists in the AI space. I've got a number of colleagues that were professing 10 years ago that we were going to end disease, that we were going to bring drugs to the market much, much sooner and much less expensive strategies to bring these drugs to the market. And that just we haven't realized that. And the other thing is being risk adverse. No one wants to put their neck on the line, especially an executive leadership role in pharma that, is moving in a direction that somewhat has been untested. Now, that being said, there have been a number of publications for the last 30, and the colleagues that I work with have been wondering why it's been such a slow burn here to get to the point where AI is more prolific. Now, that being said, there are a number of large pharma companies that have moved into the AI space. So GSK, for example, and Kim Branson and his organization, he's the senior vice president for GSK. I believe he has over 160 AI scientists working for him. So it is coming. It's coming down the road. But there's still a great deal of hype about what AI can do, what it's capable of doing right now, and specifically what it can't do. And I think One of the strengths that the teams that I have worked with in the past and am working with now is we know more about what these algorithms can't do as opposed to what they actually can't do.
Okay, interesting. So on that point, that I think most people that are listening will have mainly heard the hype, right? Not so much around the limitations, other than make sure you check that your spelling's right when it comes out of ChatGPT for your emails that you're writing. So when we're talking about the limitations of AI, in a much more complex world than we're talking about with writing emails, what are the limitations that you see, and where shouldn't we be buying into the hype, or where do we need to be cautious of buying into the hype?
Yeah, and I think it's this area that we've started talking about here this morning, and looking at molecular biology and biochemistry. And in the adult average male, there are 36 trillion cells on average. Now, if on average there are a million molecular interactions per cell, that means there are 3.6 times 10 to the 19 molecular interactions every second of every adult male's life. And so the complexity that's associated with that, and when I open talks, I usually say that we are addressing arguably the most complex system in the known universe. And it's usually at that point that I get the physicist in the audience that will roll their eyes, and they'll be the first to tell you that, or would like to tell you that that's human cognition. So I like to gently point out that that is human biology. And these algorithms, we've gotten much better in designing these algorithms to address that complexity. And I think that that is an issue where there's still a fair amount of hype. And I think that I can directly attribute that to investigators that don't really have an understanding of the complexity that we are trying to address at the molecular and biochemical level. But we have gotten much better with that. You now see data scientists that not only have computer science background, but they have domain knowledge in biology as well. And so integrating that together, you have a physicist that understands the signal transduction cascades in the cell. You've got a molecular biologist that understands the computational biology and the biostatistics. And by merging all of that together, I think we're going to make significant advances.
And some of what you've mentioned there we'll kind of cover a little bit further on the sort of implications, if you like, for what this means for people's careers as well. But while we're on this point around some of these misconceptions, what it can't do, etc., are there any companies or people that you think are getting it right, that are nailing this?
Yeah, I think there are a number of companies out there that are getting it right by implementing AI or building AI machine learning platforms to address these questions. But there is a company out there, it's a startup in New York, and James Hammett is the CEO and president of the company. It's called Vistum Labs. And they are doing something that's just absolutely mind-boggling. They are using AI to convert EEG signals, so the electrical activity of the brain, to mapping the brain itself. And so they are producing AI generated 3D maps that are actually more sensitive than positron emission tomography or MRI now. And so that provides a clinical endpoint or outcome that we are integrating with some of the things that we are doing with ex vivo diagnostics now, is that to have really sound clinical endpoints, especially in the neurodegenerative state. So Alzheimer's, being able to predict early onset of Alzheimer's from an ex vivo standpoint, from a blood draw. Can you build a diagnostic now that from the blood, the systemic circulation, which is representative of an individual's health and well-being, can you correlate that and can you use it as a surrogate signal for what's happening in the brain? And we need those very robust clinical endpoints to say, hey, this is what, from a brain mapping standpoint, this is what the brain looks like for early onset of Alzheimer's. And then we correlate that with an actual causal AI strategy of sequencing cells, sequencing RNA and DNA, cell-free RNA and DNA in the blood, building a causal dependency structure, and then using something that we have moved into now is nanoplasmonics. So we're using some heavy-duty, sophisticated physics to get in, build bioreceptors, these nanoplasmonic bioreceptors that are specific to the analytes that we uncover with the next generation sequencing and the causal AI. And so we move from a level in the blood that we are at best at the picomolar level of a concentration of an analyte down to subantomolar levels. And so that gives us the ability then, and we haven't shown this yet, but this is what we're working on, is that we may be able to pick up disease vectors that are circulating in a patient's blood years before that patient starts to experience symptoms. So I think that this is going to be a real game changer as well.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned there are companies that are doing it right, and you've mentioned where the focus needs to move towards in order to get this right. What does this mean for people like our listeners, for example, who are in the industry, who are looking at the future of their career? Like what do these changes mean for people like that?
I mean, for individuals coming right out of undergraduate or graduate school and looking for a career in the
So
space?
people that are trying to develop their career, build their career in the space, and people
Yep.
that are building, growing, leading teams.
Yeah. So in this field, so in the healthcare space,
Yep.
it's combining the quantitative sciences, the computational sciences with domain biology or biology domain expertise. These are the individuals that I look for when we are building out teams. And so a lot of these graduate programs across the United States anyway have seen this need and are actually addressing it. So you have computer science programs that have minors in biology. You have molecular biology programs that have minors in statistics and biostatistics. I think merging these fields, the quantitative sciences with molecular biology, biochemistry, is the only way to go here in the future if you really want to make a move or have an impact in the field.
So people coming into the industry, it's having sort of both sides of the coin on that.
Yes.
For people that are already in the industry and perhaps don't have one of those skill sets, like how do you think they upskill in order to kind of stay relevant?
Yeah, and it depends on what field. So there are online courses, MIT, Stanford. There are a number of these top universities that host these online courses that individuals can participate in that are very, very good. So a computer scientist can get training in molecular biology and biochemistry, and an individual in molecular biology can get AI skills online. So I strongly recommend participating in those types of courses.
And for hiring managers, what do you think that they should be looking for in the next generation of scientific?
Same thing, more of a broad domain expertise where you're combining, again, the quantitative sciences with a certain discipline in the health sciences or the life sciences, whether that's biochemistry, molecular biology, quantitative sciences is the way to go. And whether that is biostatistics, computational statistics, when I was working with Chris Holmes there at Oxford, that's what we were working on. That back in the day is where machine learning and AI have all stemmed from.
Are there any things that you find we talked about the companies that are getting it right from a talent perspective, from building effective teams? Not only so those companies that are getting it right, sounds like they've got the right approach or the approach you agree with. What do they get right in terms of building the teams and building high performing teams that are able to stay ahead and make those kind of like advancements and changes?
Well, I can share what we have done in the past, or the teams that I've supervised in the past, that have been very effective, is that we went to great lengths to establish internship and fellowship programs. So if you get an individual that is in, say, a molecular biology program or in an AI program, and you start to shape the way that they think very early on. We had a great deal of success. In fact, we hired more than a half a dozen or so individuals coming out of these programs. And what was and I was being a little opportunistic at the time, because what we were finding is somebody with the AI skills could go off and work in high tech, like Google, and make significantly more money than working for a startup or even for a pharmaceutical company and applying those skills for drug discovery and drug development. So, we were being a bit opportunistic, but we were able to identify these individuals, work with them throughout their academic training. So we would get a look at them, they would get a look at us, and they would get a taste of what it was like to, and I hope I don't sound hokey by saying this, but serve the greater good, right? Is that you're doing something impactful, meaningful, it's intellectually stimulating. So these are one of the things that we've had to build in to the programs as well as far as retention. And we have been publishing in Nature Science Cell level papers for the past decade or so, and this is a way to keep people intellectually geared towards what we are doing. And so we ended up hiring a number of these individuals after they finished or wrapped up their graduate training and came to work for us. And again, we got to look at them for at least a year, and they got to see us decide that this is somewhere that they wanted to go with their career. And so it was very effective.
Where did that idea come from, Tom? Because I hear a lot of people talking about retention challenges, people wanting to move jobs more quickly, the traditional ways of keeping people around, salary and promotion targets and leadership programs, etc. But that doesn't always solve the intellectual stimulation piece, as you've mentioned there. So where did
Right.
that idea come from? It's really clever.
I don't know that I can put a finger on it, but these are things that, when I was coming up through the ranks, these are things that I always wanted, right? To get, so there's a couple of different aspects of this. And my leadership style or it's evolved over the years where I don't micromanage, so I learned very early on, if you can, a new hire, a young person coming in, if you can help them with their confidence levels, get them to the point where they are buying into what it is that you're doing. They're taking ownership, they're taking responsibility for the work that they're doing. And if you get a team of 30 data scientists like that, you end up moving mountains. And I think my hardest lesson that I needed to learn along the way was just to get out of the way. That's what it was. You match projects with individuals with their likes. You make sure that it is intellectually stimulating. And then the conversations about raises, every 6 months just went by the wayside. People were interested in what it was that they were doing, and that we were really able to advance the needle, especially over the last decade, by getting individuals that are working together on the same team. They're playing with each other in the sandbox together, and they're looking to each other. They actually find, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm jumping around here, but they actually learn their strengths and weaknesses, and it's okay. They understand what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they understand that they're working towards something bigger than themselves. It is intellectually stimulating, and they are part of a team. And that's something that I've learned along the way, that if you're going to really do something of any significance, it's going to take a team effort.
Yeah, nice. And it sounds like finding people that where the job feels like play rather than work, from the way you're explaining it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not that it's not hard. And the other aspect of this is I've always given individuals the opportunity to fail. And when I was talking to the people that were signing my paychecks at the time, that would always open, some eyes, or, they would roll their eyes a bit with that. But that's where you learn critical thinking skills, is with the failures along the way. We have learned a great deal. And in fact, all of the causal AI that we have developed now to address the high dimensionality with these omics data sets has come from years of failure. And early on in the interview here today, I had mentioned that we actually know more about what doesn't work than what does work.
On a practical, tactical level, in terms of how you set a team up like that, because this has come up in 2 or 3 conversations over the last week about the importance, especially from senior figures in the industry, is the importance of allowing failure. And people mean slightly different things by it when they say it, but the notion is consistent. So how do you go about setting a team up to set them up to fail, but not in a bad way? How do you set them up to make failure okay? And what kind of structure do you put around those people to make sure that they're taking the risks, they're pushing the boundaries, and at the same time, if it doesn't work out, it's all good?
It is all good, and we learn, and that comes through communicating with the teams, weekly meetings, being there, part of, access to my time and effort as well. And it's that interaction with these individuals that, we are addressing something that is extraordinarily complicated, and it's not something that we're going to find a cure for cancer in 6 months. So it comes with managing expectations and understanding that failure is part of this. In fact, I would tell teams that if it works right out of the gate, I don't trust it, and I'm going to ask you to go back in and break it and put it back together again so that we do understand how it actually works. So it's those times where, it works right out of the gate that I do not trust. And 9 times out of 10, when it works the first time, it was because of a mistake. And when we go back in and look at it, we figure out that there was something, there was a mishap along the way. Now, some of those mishaps have been very fortuitous, and I applaud those mishaps as well. In fact, we had a data scientist that was working with us on the causal AI aspect of things. We were down at the single cell level, and he inadvertently made a mistake that he did not pick up on. So he inverted the data matrix. He inadvertently inverted the data
That's okay for you to
matrix. That was
say.
a mouthful. And so the output was not the disease vectors, because we were working with spatial transcriptomics, but it was the actual spots on the actual tissue for where these disease vectors were originating. And I instantly understood that not only are we building a causal dependency network of these gene vectors, we were building a causal dependency structure of where those signals were originating. And it led us to identifying down to about, at the time, it was about 55 microns within a tissue slide, that we identified where these aberrant signals were originating, and then we were able to go in and tease apart the cells that were abnormal, that were actually driving the tumor development. And so that originated from a mistake, a very fortuitous mistake, and I applauded that. And, the data scientist at the time, I could tell, was feeling a little sheepish because it was a mistake, but I was very pleased that ended up happening. It advanced what we were doing, put it that way.
Nice. Did you always think that? Did you always think of yourself as a leader, Tom, or has it just sort of happened as a result?
Can you say that again, Will?
Have you
What was that?
always thought of yourself as a leader? Was it a deliberate decision to kind of go into leadership, or did it happen as a result of the passion that you have for what you do?
Yeah, talking about mistakes and anytime I've had a game plan, they usually don't work out, or it goes down a different direction. So, the leadership roles that I have stepped into, I think it's probably a combination of being so passionate about what, we're working on, actually being able to sift through a lot of the things that don't work. I was going to say nonsense, and I've just said nonsense, but I've seen that from some of my mentors in the past that, there's just not a need for that. And always felt like, there's probably a better way of doing that. And, I think that better way of doing that is to get in, help develop a team, and then turn them loose. Let them get to the point where they are taking ownership and responsibility in what they're doing. And that you really don't have to lead at that point. You've got people that are coming in early, they're staying late, they're working on the weekends, they're calling you at midnight saying, hey, I just uncovered this, and can we talk about this tomorrow morning? Now, there's a sense of excitement that builds. as opposed to coming in and micromanaging and working on a project that no one has a real interest in.
Yeah, nice, nice. So if you had somebody here in front of you and you're giving them real kind of practical advice on how to build and lead that team, that high performing team, and you can only give them two pieces of advice, which two pieces of advice would you give?
Two pieces of advice for building a team and being a leader, right?
Yep.
Always be transparent and honest and try and get yourself out of the way. And what I mean by getting yourself out of the way is that, it's not your team, it is the team. And, for individuals to charge that hill with you, they need to feel that they are a productive member of the team. And I think by doing that, always being transparent, even if it's bad news, if you're always transparent, that develops a sense of trust. I've got individuals that I've worked with in the past that would still, they call me from time to time, say, Tom, what are you working on? Do you think we can get the band back together? Those types of things. So, honesty, I think, first and foremost, and then being able to get, from my standpoint, it was me trying to get myself out of the way. Even when you've got a younger individual that you can see the mistakes that they're making along the way, and understanding that is extraordinarily important. And if you step in and you micromanage, they're not going to develop those critical thinking
Absolutely.
skills.
It's a necessary part of the process, right? Tom, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else that you would like to add that you think would be valuable for the audience to hear today?
I think that the AI space, although there is a lot of hype, I do believe that the AI is going to teach us how to ask the right questions that will ultimately lead to eradicating disease. I don't think disease is our natural state, and by understanding, normal molecular physiology, which AI is very good at, if it's applied in the right manner, will eventually lead to, one, building more efficacious drugs, and two, eventually eradicating disease. And I know that sounds like a whole lot of hype, but I truly believe that that's coming down the road.
Really exciting stuff. Really exciting. And if somebody's listened to this and thought, A, I've got a question for Tom, or B, something really excited them about what you've said about leadership or AI, and they just want to reach out, and even if it's just to say thanks for sharing your wisdom, where can they get you?
LinkedIn is a good way. That has my QMUL email. If you're in my network, you get access to the QMUL email. But LinkedIn is a good way for that.
Awesome.
And Will, you can share my email.
I will.
I'll put it this way: you can share my email if that'll work.
People reach out to me and if people want to reach out to Tom, and you're listening right now and you really want to get hold of him, shoot us a line and we can put you in touch. Tom, thank you so much.
Well, Will, this has been fantastic. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you very much for taking the time to share your experience, share your wisdom. I'm certain this is valuable for the people listening in. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Will. All right, very good.
Thanks for listening to Leaders of Life Sciences. We hope you're leaving with fresh ideas and inspiration to lead with clarity and purpose. If you're hiring, building your leadership team, or thinking about your next move, we'd love to support you. You'll find everything you need to get in touch in the show notes. And if you enjoyed the show, please follow and share it with someone who'd find it valuable. Until next time, keep leading forward.